All right, next up we're going to install the EOS Utility software for the Canon T5i. Your disk should say 28.0 on it, version number. And I'm a PC guy, sorry, for all those Macintosh people out there. Actually, one of my very first computers was a Macintosh computer. So once this, pretty obvious stuff, pick your country, pick your language. This EOS Utility software is just a really cool piece of software for filming yourself. There's other uses. You could definitely use it in a studio environment or times that you don't want to actually physically touch the camera. Let's say you're doing like product photography. It's also good for that type stuff as well. But what I primarily use it for, here I'm going to choose custom installation, say OK. And I only install the EOS Utility software. There's some other cool stuff found here like Photo Stitch. If you don't have a program that already stitches photos together, you could definitely use that. So go ahead and install it. Click yes. If you pick no, I guess they won't allow you to actually do anything with it. But again, it's a really great piece of software for filming yourself. If you do a lot of things like I do, where you're doing screen capture. Sorry, you can probably hear the CD spinning away. But if you're doing a lot of screen capture and using the camera and you're cutting between the two, like I am actually right now, it's an awesome way to do it using this EOS Utility. So it says it's installed. We say next. I say no, I'm not going to register. Say OK, say finish. And then you should have somewhere on your desktop or Apple computer or whatever, Unix, Linux, whatever you use, EOS Utility. And now what you're going to have here is you're going to see this is the one we want, camera remote shooting. It's not going to do anything until you do two things. One is you got to connect your cable up to your computer and then connect this as your AV digital port. And then once you've got that connected, go ahead and turn the camera all the way on to video mode. And then now you'll see it light up. And you'll actually be able to see the back of the display as well. And then once it's on, you'll get this window right here. And it'll actually say EOS Rebel T5i. If you have a 700D, it's going to say 700D. Click Live View Shoot. And then we can see what we've got here. So we can do a lot of different things. I can, for instance, let's bring down the ISO down to maybe 100. And let's bring the, so you can change their shutter speed. You can change the ISO, you can change your aperture. Let's bring the aperture up a little bit. Maybe we're going for these houses. Now it's gonna be hard for it to focus. If I do have yes, I do have it on autofocus. I can double click right here and have it try to focus. And it's probably focusing on the screen rather than the actual buildings over there. But let me see if I can focus down here. And if you double click, it'll actually zoom in as well and bring up a new window. A lot of things you can't see probably. I'm gonna put a gray card and try to shoot this gray card. See if we can do this. And here, I'll zoom in a little bit because I can see it a little bit here. Let's go ahead and bring up the exposure. So I'm going to bring down the f-stop, the aperture number. Bring it down to about 5, I guess. And then we're going to bring up the ISO. And then right here we can look at the histogram, which is great because we've got the histogram right here. So this is a wonderful type thing when you're shooting yourself. And I'm just going to try to quickly, just for demonstration purposes, you've got that right here. And I'm going to go ahead and drag this here and double click on it and it locked on. And another thing you can do, so we've kind of set the exposure, which is great. And we can also set the white balance. So I'm going to go ahead and click on here, just click anywhere on there. And now I've created a custom white balance for the gray card in this given lighting situation. So awesome tool. I mean, there's tons of things you can do with it. Definitely play around with it. Like I said, you can go in here and change picture styles. You can change the sharpness, color tone. There's just a ton of different things. If you can access it within the camera, you're most likely be able to access it here. And then obviously the last thing is hit record and you're recording a video. and then hit stop. So when you see me recording myself, a lot of times I'm just doing it here. I don't have to go all the way to the other side of the camera and press record. So definitely check it out. EOS Utility software is pretty cool. All right, let's talk about focus next. I think you're gonna have a love-hate relationship with this camera. You're gonna love it because up till a few years ago, you couldn't do what you can do with this camera, and that is you can get super shallow depth of field, cinematic, like what you'd see in the movies. In fact, several movies have been shot with cameras like this, which is just incredible. So you're gonna love that part of it, but you're gonna hate it because with that shallow depth of field, becomes the challenge of how you focus this thing. And I think I talked about, we're not going to really talk about using external pieces of equipment, but I'm going to have to talk about a few here because focusing this with just the camera that you've got, the lens and the display that you have on the back is very challenging at super low f-stop numbers like 1.8 or 2.8. So let's talk about focus next. All right, when we're shooting stills, this camera is awesome when checking for focus, because what you can do after you've shot a still is you can zoom in, way in, just like somebody's eye to make sure it's in focus. Well, unfortunately with video, we don't have that luxury of being able to zoom in. So we're gonna have to talk about some external devices in this chapter. One of them is a larger external monitor, because I think a lot of you probably have already experienced this, where you've taken a picture, you've looked at the back of the display and you're like, man, it looks great, looks awesome, it's sharp. Then you bring it onto your computer and bring it up, you're like, oh, the eyes are soft, or it's just out of focus, or I got the tip of the noses in focus and the eye is out of focus, especially when you're shooting at 1.8, that can definitely happen. Or the ear is in focus and the eye is out of focus, or one of those combinations of those two. So with video, having a larger display, an external monitor, and with those external monitors, you can see better. And with them also is you can get different tools for focus. And one of them is like focus peaking. Just not to go too advanced here, but you can download different software called Magic Lantern onto these Rebel line of cameras, and you can actually go in and have focus peaking displayed on this display, which is actually a very neat feature if you don't have room or you're doing a run and gun type of feature. But that kind of goes beyond the course because this is a very beginner level course. What if I'm using a Steadicam, GlideCam, Blackbird device, or whatever you've got? How do I keep everything in focus when I'm shooting with one of those? Well, two different things. One, let's say you're shooting outside, which is a great place to do it. Let's say you're following somebody or traveling around somebody, or whatever you're doing with your GlideCam device. One, if you're outside, don't put an ND filter on it and let your f-stop go very high, like f16, f14. A lot of things are going to be in focus at that point. The other thing to do is shoot very wide. So like, let's say you're using on these crop sensor cameras, let's say you're using a Canon 11 to 16 and you're all the way out at 11, very wide, with a combination of being very wide and a high f-stop number. Just about everything's going to be in focus past like 4 to 6 feet from your camera. So that's a great way to keep everything in focus, is if everything is in focus. So because obviously if you're got one hand on the GlideCam and then you reach around and you try to focus with it, as soon as you touch the lens to try to focus, you're going to knock the camera. And the whole reason you've got the GlideCam is to have a nice steady shot. You've kind of ruined that steady shot. I guess if you wanted to, and I think I've seen other people do this, but it gets well beyond this course, is what you could do is have some sort of wireless type of situation. Let's say you're indoors and you're shooting at, let's say, 3.5 and you're following somebody. Well, somebody externally could be sitting down on an external monitor watching your moves and focusing for you remotely. That's totally different, and that's much more complicated in this course, and I've never done that. But the trick here is high f-stop number and shoot really wide in that situation. All right, next up we're going to talk about all the different autofocus and manual focus methods. Before we start, I just want to describe what we've got going on here. I've got basically the dial in the foreground. I've got a target in the background. And then very close in the foreground, I've got one of my lens blowers. So we're going to be focusing around on these different objects in different modes. I'm using the 18 to 135 with an STM lens. It's a stepping motor lens. So this is one thing it does really well, is work with this servo AF, this little green button that we have right here, or green circle. And basically what it indicates is that it's turned on, the servo AF. So basically what that is if something in the frame is moving around, and let's say you're on face detect, and it's going to track my face, and if I move closer, it's going to refocus automatically. And it does it extremely quietly. I mean, you have to put your ear pretty much right up to that lens to hear it going. It's very, very quiet. And you might hear it with the microphones on top of the camera a little bit, only if you really turn up the gain a lot. But besides that, it's a very quiet. If you use this with a different lens, that's not meant for this, like an L series lens, you're going to hear it going, it's going to be going in and out, and it's going to make a lot of noise. So in that case, it'll work, maybe not work as well, but you're just going to have to do dual sync sound so you don't hear that with the motor. All right, so we're going to start off with the first method, and that's the one on the right hand side is the one I use the most, is FlexiZone Single. And let's get out of here. So basically with FlexiZone Single, you can rearrange anywhere on the screen where you want it to focus to. So if I want to focus on our eyes, it's going to focus on our eyes. If I want to go to digital, there are this target. You see it takes a few seconds. And if I go to the blower, let's see if we can get the blower this time. Sometimes, oh, there it goes. It's got it that time. And when it does it, so if I go to her eyes, and her nose is in this box as well, it's going to go to the closest thing. And then if I press the shutter halfway down, you'll get a lock. It'll show you that, yes, I have acquired focus. So if something is too close and it can't get it, you won't get this green box appear. But that blower is close enough distance to the lens, or actually the focal plane mark, that it can actually handle it. So a few things to know about focusing, things that the camera's going to have problems with. One is with horizontal lines. The manual will tell you that if you have a lot of horizontal lines in it, it might get confused. Another thing is, like, if you have a bumper that's very reflective, and you got a lot of spectral highlights coming off of it, it might get confused there. If you have you're in a situation where you have fluorescent lights and there's a lot of flickering going on in the room, your camera might have problems focusing in that situation as well. And also very low light. And if it's extremely low light and there's hardly any contrast, your camera will also have problems focusing there as well. So the one thing I like about this single method is that we can zoom in. This is the only method of the three that we can zoom in on. So if you can zoom in using the normal button, or you can use this button right here. So once it gets you into the menu, that's 5 times, and that's 10 times. So if I cursor over to her left eye, and I've done it in such a way where I put her eyes in the doll a little bit different, so you can see what's going on here in terms of focus. So I'm going to press the shutter halfway down, and I've got nice focus right on her eye. Now if I go to her other eye, you can see it's not quite in focus because it's a little bit farther away from the camera. Now if I press the shutter halfway down, boom, you can see especially that reflective part of her eye is what I was going for, and it's right on focus. So this is the only method we've got that can do this type of critical focus. So if we go over to the target, you can see it starting to come in. Now if I press here, it doesn't do anything, but if I press the shutter, it's going to say, oh, okay, well, there we go. And it locks in on it. And then if I go to the blower, let's do the blower, what the heck? And let's move up to the tip because it seems to have more success with the tip. All I see is red. Let's see if it does it. Yep, boom. And it grabs it. So this is our most accurate way of doing it. So let's move on. We've got FlexiZone Multi. Now this one, let's return. We've got this kind of 16 by 9 aspect ratio box. And inside that box, we have 21 focus points. If you're on the still side, and when you're 4:3 aspect ratio, you got 31 points to choose from, but this one has 21 points in it. Now, you can narrow this down to a smaller area by hitting the set button, the trash button, or just taking your finger. Now, I can focus on her face, that's 1, so you got left, middle, and right. So if we go to the middle, it's going to probably focus on her face because it's the closest. Now, if I go to the right, it should focus on the blower. And it does. Now, what we've got here is if I press the shutter halfway down, you're going to see 3 on the right-hand side. You see 3 green ones lit up. Let's see if I can keep that on the screen for a sec. See those 3 green boxes? That tells you where it focused on. So now if I go to the middle, now it's got to decide between the digital calibration target, or the target and her face. Let's see what it does. Probably the closest one. And sure enough, it picked her hair and her face. And if I go over here, obviously it's going to pick her face. Now, with this one is not super accurate because, like right here, you can see it's taking the objects closest and it's taking her nose. And I don't really want her nose in focus. If this was a real person, I want her eye in focus. So this is not the best method for doing it unless the subject was so far away, the tip of her nose to her eye at that particular aperture, there really wasn't any difference in focus. And like I said before, if we try to zoom in, we can zoom in on this. But what happens is when we try to focus just on her eye and I press the shutter halfway down, watch what happens. It kicks me out. So I can't do like this critical focus when zoomed in and just on that part of her eye. All right, next up, if we hit the Q button and we go to face detect, and we return. Now it's very obvious it found her face, and it does a pretty good job finding people's faces. You could leave the frame and come back to the frame and it'll still find the face. And I can move the camera around a little bit here and you can see it's still going to keep tracking her. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut to another video where I move in and out and show you how well it works. All right, now I got face detection on, and you can see as I'm moving around, the little square is tracking me. Now with this, since I can't reach it, but I can tell you if you want to reset it, you hit the set button or the trash can button, and it'll actually put it back into the center, and then it kind of starts over again and it looks for somebody's face. But it's pretty accurate. Like if I see if I put my girl's faces. No, sometimes it'll actually track with somebody else's face. So as I move around, you can see it's tracking pretty well. Let's go ahead and move back. I don't know if you can hear me or not, but as you get smaller and smaller, sometimes you'll actually lose it. The manual says and then if you get too close, now see, it's having some issue trying to focus on me. It's not, as it's tracking me, it takes a while. To find your face and then actually focus on it. And I've got an external microphone right here, so you're not hearing the noise of the lens, but it's actually quite quiet. It's not that bad. All right, and also in this mode, you can't zoom. So you can't zoom within that square. So if I were to, I can't do it because the camera's too far away, but if I were to hit the zoom button a couple times, it wouldn't do anything. So this is pretty much the face tracking. And you can decide what for yourself. Right now I'm at an aperture of 4.5 is the lowest I could go, because I zoomed in a little bit. But you can tell from me moving around, how well it's doing. Okay, next up I want to talk about manual focus. So we're going to go back to the Flexi Zone single, and we're going to put it right on her eyes, and I'm going to focus. And like I said before, when you do this, it's probably going to pick her nose, as it's the closest thing, and I don't want her nose. So when you want to do it super critical and you want to make sure you nailed it, then I would suggest manually focusing. Right now we're in autofocus mode on the lens. If I rotate, I'm rotating the barrel right now, the focus barrel, and nothing's happening. I mean, it's locked on. Most lenses, if it's a non-STM lens, it would actually be changing the focus. Some lenses you can do this when you're in autofocus mode, and some you cannot. Like, for instance, some of the L series glass, like the 24-70, you have no problem. You can focus while it's in autofocus mode. But if, like my Canon 1.8 lens, you cannot. You can't, when it's in autofocus mode, you're going to be working against the motor, and it's not a good thing. This one, you can rotate it, but it's not going to do anything. So I'm going to switch to manual focus. And now when I rotate the barrel, you'll see that it's gone out of focus, and now it's going back in focus. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to use the zoom button, and then I'll reposition to, well, let's say this eye. And then I will just take my finger on the barrel until I get exactly where I want it to be, right there. And once I've got it, I can zoom back out again, and I've got really good focus. So the point I'm trying to make here is, if you want to do manual focus, you've got to put it to manual focus with an STM lens like the 18-135. Pretty much all the other ones you can do on the fly, except for, like I talked about, the 1.8. Just check your manual on the lens, whether you can do that or not. If you feel like you're working against the motor, then don't do it. You don't want to ruin your lens. All right, so that's pretty much it. Focus, really important. It's probably the most important thing. Yeah, I will say it's the most important thing, because if you don't get it right, you can't fix it in post. I mean, white balance you could fix, exposure you can fix. You can fix a lot of things in post, but when it comes to focus, not so much. So if you're focusing on somebody and they're the interview person, focus in on their eyes, and take your time, lock it in. And like I said before, one of the things you're going to love about this camera is this beautiful shallow depth of field that you can get. But on the flip side, one of the things you're not going to like is the whole aspect of trying to keep somebody in focus. So that's pretty much it for focus.